In today's video, we will be explaining Hitoshi Shinso's brainwashing quirk and the upgrades that he has received in order to be able to compete with the other students in the hero course, as well as why Aizawa is personally training Shinso. But before I continue on with today's video, if you are new to the channel, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so that way you never miss an upload. With that said, let's get back to the video. Alright, so let's first do a quick breakdown of Shinso's brainwashing quirk, as well as take a look at some of its drawbacks / limitations. This quirk allows Shinso to brainwash anyone who verbally responds to him if he allows it, since in order to brainwash someone he has to focus his attention on his target and think to himself, this is who I'm going to brainwash, and whoever he brainwashes will do whatever he commands them to do. It's an extremely powerful quirk that does come with quite a few drawbacks. For one, his brainwashing will break its hold on his target if the target receives a sufficient amount of damage. The damage could range anywhere from just a mere slap in the face to breaking their finger or bones in general. His brainwashing could also break its hold just by simply accidentally bumping shoulders with said brainwashed target. The second drawback to this quirk is that he can't command his target to speak or use their brain in any way. For example, if you were to ask his target what was the name of the frog girl from class 1A and to write down what her name is, his target would be unable to write it down or say the name, even though that person, when they aren't brainwashed, knows that the frog girl from class 1A's name is Tsuyu Asui. But if he were to hold up a sign with Tsuyu's name on it and ask the target to write what was on the sign down on a piece of paper, the order will go through. As for brainwashing's third big downside is that if Shinso goes up against an opponent or a group of villains that has prior knowledge on what his quirk is or figures out what his quirk is, he is left pretty much unable to defend himself, since all his opponents would have to do at this point is not respond to him. Brainwashing is a quirk that doesn't physically enhance him in any way, so if his brainwashing fails, then he is left pretty much defenseless, which makes him and his quirk very similar to Aizawa and his eraser quirk. Another big downside of Shinso's quirk is that he can't brainwash someone if his voice is heard through a microphone, megaphone, or through video, because these electronical devices distort his voice too much, which then makes him unable to brainwash anyone. Now, Shinso has stated that brainwashing multiple people is probably impossible since it would split his focus too much, but I wouldn't consider this a drawback / limitation just yet, since Shinso even says he hasn't tried doing it yet. Plus, I think he is heavily downplaying himself in this moment, since he still hasn't fully trained and mastered his quirk yet, so there is plenty of untapped potential in Shinso and his quirk, which Aizawa sees a lot of potential in Shinso. Now that we've gotten through the breakdown of his quirk, let's now finally get into the reason why Aizawa ends up taking Shinso under his wing and training him in the first place. So, during the sports festival, we find out that Shinso was in general studies due to him failing the practical part of the entrance exam. Even though his quirk is very powerful, due to the format of the practical exam, his quirk wasn't much help, since during the practical exam, they were up against robots. The sports festival, though, gives students like Shinso a second chance to prove they have what it takes to be in the hero course, and that's exactly what Shinso did, catching the attention of many pro heroes that were in the audience, and most importantly, catching the attention of Aizawa. Aizawa, during the sports festival, even states that Shinso has an extraordinarily powerful quirk, but was placed in general studies due to how irrational the entrance exam was, calling out just how flawed UA's entrance exam really is. So Aizawa, being the GOAT that he is, ends up putting Shinso under his wing and secretly trains Shinso due to him seeing a lot of potential in Shinso, as well as being able to relate to him, since both of them have similar types of quirks and drawbacks. Aizawa even says to Shinso, and I quote, "People like you and me, when things go south, we're dead if we can't rely on ourselves," end quote. And this shows us that these two characters are very similar to each other, because if their quirks end up failing them during a fight, they are left unable to fight back, meaning that they can't rely too heavily on their quirks to get the job job done, unlike many other heroes. And with Aizawa and Shinso having so many similarities, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go down the same route as Aizawa, where he becomes an independent underground hero, staying out of the spotlight, that way less villains are aware of his quirk. Now, to better prepare Shinso for his potential transfer into the hero course, Aizawa decided to personally train Shinso in combat and boost his physical strength, so that way when his quirk fails in brainwashing his opponent, he will still be able to defend himself without it, especially since during his training with Aizawa, Shinso receives two notable upgrades that are shown off during the joint training arc. The first upgrade that he receives is his own binding cloth / scarf, which is the same exact binding cloth that Aizawa uses. During Shinso's training, we find out that it took Aizawa 6 whole years to master the binding cloth, and unlike Shinso, who has a master in Aizawa, Aizawa had to learn how to use the binding cloth from scratch. So having Aizawa personally teach Shinso, giving him little tips and tricks on how to use the binding cloth, will significantly shorten the amount of time it will take Shinso to master using the binding cloth in combat compared to Aizawa. And we actually know this to be the case, since during the joint training exam, we see that Shinso is actually competent enough to use the binding cloth in battle. He is shown being able to swing off of pipes, he can pull off pipes to drop them on top of his opponent like he did to Beast, and his aim is pretty solid, with him being able to shoot the cloth at Ochako from a pretty long distance, and he even is able to yank people with the binding cloth as well. Shinso is still not on the same level of Aizawa though when it comes to using the binding cloth, and that's pretty obvious because Aizawa is basically the master of using the binding cloth, and Shinso still has a lot to learn and master when it comes to the binding cloth as well as his quirk. But from him being able to use the binding cloth the way that he did in the short amount of time he has been training with Aizawa is really impressive and proves that Shinso honestly deserves to be in the hero course. As for Shinso's second upgrade, we see him rocking a new mask. This mask is his Persona Chords mask. The mask acts like a voice modulator, modifying the sound of his actual voice. And the way that it works is that there are all of these little plates in the mask that shift around and resonate to modify how his voice sounds, allowing him to mimic another person's voice where he can pretend to be them. But unlike talking through a megaphone or a microphone, the mask doesn't distort his voice, meaning that he can still be able to brainwash anyone when mimicking someone with his Persona Chords. When seeing the Persona Chords in action, we see that Shinso flicks a switch on the side of his mask, and then he is able to mimic the voice of Kosei, and is able to trick Beast into responding to him, effectively brainwashing Beast. The Persona Chords mask is honestly a very powerful piece of equipment when paired up with Shinso's quirk, since if he were to face off against a group of people, he can effectively stop the group from communicating with each other because no one is going to want to risk being brainwashed, which he can then use this to his advantage, making it so just his sheer presence alone is able to let him and his teammates control the battlefield. Shinso's training, the binding cloth, and the Persona Chords have basically negated most of Shinso's personal weaknesses, with the training and binding cloth making it so he isn't too reliant on his quirk and is still able to defend himself and put up a fight, as well as some of his quirk's weaknesses, with the Persona Chords making it a lot easier to trick people into responding to him, even when they know what exactly his quirk does. These upgrades have definitely made Shinso a very formidable opponent, and after seeing Shinso's grind and his growth, I think he definitely has earned his spot in the hero course. And I can personally see Shinso having a moment very similar to Aizawa during the USJ arc, where he is surrounded by villains and the villains aren't all too sure on how to take him on, using that confusion and fear to his advantage, tricking them, brainwashing them to fight for him. I think Shinso will end up being a really important character in the future, and I honestly can't wait to see how how Horikoshi will end up using Shinso later on in the story, and what his costume design will be like when he inevitably joins the hero course. And if Horikoshi does go the route of giving Shinso a quirk awakening, I could see it making his brainwashing more durable to where it's not as easy for someone to snap another person out of being in that brainwashed state. Maybe with a quirk awakening, you have to physically knock them out if you want them to snap out of it, or even just hitting them super hard instead of just slapping them or bumping them on the shoulder. But who knows what we could see from Shinso's quirk awakening. Let me know in the comment section below what you all thought about the video and Shinso. Do you think Shinso is going to transfer to either class 1A or class 1B? Do you like Shinso? What do you think his quirk awakening would look like if he were to get one? Let me know everything in the comment section below. For me, I really like Shinso, and I hope he ends up making it into class 1A because I would love to see more from him. With that said, if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to Detroit smash that like button below, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. If you want to see more My Hero Academia content, then be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on to join the Kitoroki Hero Academia to become my hero. Doing all of this really does help the channel out a lot, and it's always appreciated. You can also follow me on Twitter at Showbobs5, so that way we can talk more about My Hero Academia and any other anime/manga all day long. Remember to stay plus ultra, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.